Welcome everybody to the B Podcast, the podcast of the Barcelona International Dance Exchange. Today, in our episode 146, we have as a guest Zorana Mihelčić. I pronounce it right?
Yes, almost. Mihelčić.
Mihelčić. Hi, Zorana. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me in. Say hello to all your listeners.
So, first of all, from what part of the planet you are talking with us today?
I think the most beautiful part. It's a Mediterranean. It's a Croatian coast, somewhere in between Split and Zadar. Šibenik is a beautiful small town of about 15,000 people, like a small Venice, but in Croatia.
I like this definition, small Venice, but in Croatia.
Right.
We'll be talking about this location later because also it's attached to your line of work. But first of all, the second question that we like to do with all our guests is ask them who they are. You know, usually people in our line of work tend to define themselves through the thing they do, you know, so and we like to in BIDE, you know that we have another ethos, and it's about that we consider the person first, and then what they do is coming later, so to speak, because they are is because is why they do what they do. So if you want to describe to people that maybe don't know you, who is Zorana in this summer 2026 that is crossing us really hard in terms of weather. So what you be saying about you? It's more about describing rather than define yourself.
Yeah, okay. It's easier for the others, but okay, I know how to define myself. I'm desperately in love with art. But through some, life circumstances, that art was more linked to the dance art, However, I followed and enjoyed and danced art since I was a child. But I lived in Šibenik. It's a very, my childhood I spent in Šibenik, a town where I couldn't actually afford to go to have some formal education. But so I had some, classes like all the kids do in small towns, some classical ballet. Of course, there was no contemporary dance at the time. And then when I moved to a bigger town, it was specifically Belgrade, the capital of ex-Yugoslavia. It was the country of my youth. And then I started being an active dancer in a contemporary dance company by Smiljana Mandukic. So not to go into details now. And since then, actually, I have never stopped being deeply, immersed into dance.
And from your, let's say, from your philosophy or from your emotions, or let's take him back a bit, the professional side. I know that you're a person who loves arts, but if you also describe yourself where you are right now as a human being, as a person and as a mother and a grandmother also, no? If I'm correct.
Yeah, now I'm a newly appointed a grandmother of two grandchildren. Yeah, I don't know. It's very difficult for me. This question is really difficult. Who am I? A person who loves, contacts, being with people, being around people that know me, that I love, to be in a relaxed atmosphere. Not to be judged, a person who loves people of all nationalities, and who hate, wars and divisions by passports, by nationalities, whatever. I don't know what else to say about myself. Hardworking, very persistent, sometimes stubborn. The best motivation for me ever is when you tell me, no, you can't do that, and I know that I'm doing something which is good, either for my town, my community, or for my family.
And knowing that, that the type of energy that you have and the type of synergy, so to speak, that you develop with people, who do you think are or what do you think that you are bringing to the performing arts ecosystem? Like what Zorana bring to this marvelous, sometimes difficult, and sometimes challenging, but sometimes also really beautiful space that is the ecosystem of the performing arts, especially in dance.
What I think that I bring is exactly what I mentioned before, the power of the language of dance, the language of an art which does not need words and that does not reject anyone, no matter what nationality, what gender, what race, whatever the person is. And I think that it's not very easy, in the environment that I come from. It's a kind of a traditional Catholic environment, it's not easy to bring, for example, as a curator and dance festival programmer, to bring the performances which I actually like very much, but I have to be very careful not to offend, the feelings of the people who belong to this community. So people who know me know that I'm brave, but I, walk slowly. I step very slowly, like walking on eggs, Right.
Great. And where do you draw inspiration from? I mean, you're a super energetic person, and you're also, we'll be talking about your festival soon. But where are your areas of inspiration where you take this energy to be the Zorana that I know since a few years ago already?
Inspiration is actually the town that I live in, the architecture, the Baroque, beautiful, amazing material, heritage that I'm surrounded with. That was the preliminary, inspiration that I got when I decided to try to venture into organizing a festival. When I was a child, I used to sit and watch the children performances on the open air, because we have a very long tradition of a international children festival in Šibenik. And as a child, I used to come there. The parents would just, leave us, the bunch of sitting in front of the cathedral where the stage was, and they would go to have some beer or something, and we, the children, would sit down, and sit down and look at the performances. And then on those occasions, I remember that I noticed, some very good foreign companies, like from USA or France or whatever, and they dance contemporary or a neoclassical ballet, something like that. I cannot remember properly now, but I know that since then I'm kind of obsessed, with that, with the art on the open. And when I returned from Belgrade to start my family life here, then I realized that I would like to continue that, my vision from the childhood, but in this sense, to make something with dance. And that's how my idea, started to get realized slowly. So the answer to your question is yes. The inspiration was the original inspiration that I drew it from was the architecture of my town.
Okay, that is a very, let's say, beautiful place. I was there like 1 week ago, when this podcast be released, be quite later in terms of the calendar. So knowing that, also, what do you think that, or what are you questioning at this point in your life, having a long-term festival, a long-term career, a long relationship also with the educational programs that you are also holding there, and all the trips that you do, and in some festival where we concur with each other. So it's a question that is quite, resonant with you nowadays, with what are you doing and where you want to be in a few years ahead.
You mean, where do I see myself in, for example, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, or maybe some question that you are quite, having in mind nowadays.
Yeah, I'm questioning all the time, because I'm not that young in this business anymore, and I would really much like to see, a bunch of young people, young artists that would like to contribute to this festival, to continue what I had started once 15 years ago with the festival and 25 years ago with a dance here in this community. Well, questions are, there are many questions, of course, the financial reason, financial matter, how hard will it be, to make this event sustainable? Everything is, the price is going higher. The culture, art in general in Europe, I don't think that we have more, money. I think it's always less than we need, and then we fight, fiercely just to make it live. Those are the questions, and the questions is whether the audience is interested in the same amount, not amount, but in the same level as the audience was interested 20, years ago. Because when I was a younger woman, I know that it was not a problem to sit and watch any performance and dance performance for 45 or 60 or 90 minutes. But today, I see that, they kind of start fidgeting when there is a performance longer than 30 minutes. That the audience has changed. So many questions.
And thinking about these questions, it's a question that we bring a few years ago. How many times have you thought about quitting? About leaving this line of work?
I know that you know the answer, Sebastián. It's always, when the stress is on its highest level, it's usually a month or two even before the festival starts. And then it's always, that line in my head. I think this is the last edition that I will do, and then it's over. But again, I don't know why. Something happens in my mind, some email of the beautiful artists that I get, of some companies or independent artists that are fighting for their art. And then I said, okay, let's make it once more, and then I'll see, and somehow, one leads to another, and I realized, and I organized the next edition, and it's now 15th edition with the same procedure, always the same, flow of thoughts.
Yeah, totally. And one more question in this line of thinking. It's kind of the opposite, So you remember a moment that you realize I can do this, or I can do it?
For the festival, I think.
In general, with your profession, with whatever you understand or get from this question. So the moment that you say, maybe it was not only one moment, maybe you have many ones, but a moment that you realize, okay, I can dedicate myself to this, to performing, not to dance.
Yes, I remember the moment, but although I'm not sure that I was right, the moment was when that Šibenik has 4 fortresses, and these fortresses were absolutely neglected. All the ruins, almost not the ruins from the outside look, they looked fine, but inside very neglected. Lots of bushes and everything, but then Croatia entered the European Union. We got some, very good funding for the renovation of those for those fortresses. And then I stepped onto one when it was like a opening ceremony of the new renovated fortress, St. Michael's Fortress, with 1,100 seats,
Wow.
And on that opening, it was a fabulous ceremony, really something amazing. When I sat in the audience, and then I knew I have to bring dancers here, because I love this. And the festival was already 4th or 5th year. It was a young festival, and it wasn't an international. I had only, Croatian or perhaps from the region, dancers from Slovenia, Serbia, or Bosnia. But I couldn't venture, into inviting more international guests because I had a, very symbolic budget. But then when I decided somewhere in the back of my head, oh, well, I want dancers. I want to see dancers on the stage, huge company, etc. And then, when once the thoughts enters your mind, I say that to my students and to my family, my children, always. Once a good thought settles into your mind, it will be realized. Sooner or later, it will be realized. And it's exactly how it happened with this international career of my festival. I invited, I always go very carefully, I'm cautious. So I invited folklore in ensemble, a Croatian folklore ensemble, Lado, but they travel through, all around the world. They perform at least in Croatia, and I had a good opportunity to bring them because I knew that the city council, they will allow it because it's not contemporary. They didn't know anything about contemporary dance. I knew I had to go slowly. So I invited that huge folklore ensemble, and I got it. I negotiated, of course, because some of the board were my good friends, and they didn't get me very, the big prize like they do when they travel internationally. And so I got them, and that was my entrance to the back door, I would say, to the big stage. And once I entered, I promised them that I would. Oh, sorry, I think it's do you hear me?
Sí.
Okay, sorry, because I had something interrupted.
No
And once I told you, once they entered the stage on St. Michael's Fortress, the city council, the mayor of the town, the Ministry of Culture, they kind of believe me that I am able to organize, something large scale on that stage. And that's why when I started inviting, some bigger companies, and the program started to grow.
Wow, great. So now maybe it's the time to ask you, because we name it from different angles, what is a festival that you're organizing since 15 years ago? So it's kind of a baby, no? Also, and also, I mean, besides what is a festival, is what resonate with you by putting so much energy and make it happen for many years. We'll always respect, people who really sustain and persist, rather let's say the visibility or the numbers or whatever. So the time is a quite important thing for us. So can you tell us a bit what is the Šibenik Festival and why you decided to do it?
Well, I'll tell you, when I returned from Belgrade, where I studied and danced, it was a time of war. There was a war in this region, very fierce war for 4 or 5 years. I have to wait a bit, until everything settles down. And then sometime around 2000, it means almost 10 years after the war, or no, 5 years, or after the war had finished, I started with the studio. I just, opened and founded dance theater, The Shadows. It was not a formal dance school, but it was kind of a studio, and I had really a successful career as an artistic leader of the studio. It is a youth ensemble and also groups, children from 4 to 24. And through time, we traveled a lot, and we did many really good things and educated young people exclusively in contemporary dance. And then I was just, I told you, kind of a person that wants to develop in my career, to grow. And I found out that I somehow want to do something on the next step, next level. And that's when I decided that I will try with organizing a festival. What to say about the festival? It started, like a baby with not international companies, only with 2 stages. We had the 2 squares, Poljana Square and square in front of the cathedral. But, from year to year, it slowly, gradually grew. And once we reached the fortresses, first with the St. Michael, and then very soon with the Barone Fortress, is the fortress with a smaller number of seats or audience for small format performances according to my venue. I started selecting my program, and then from the people that came, I started to do some networking, and they sort of invited me to their platforms, meeting choreographers, etc. I was also recommended when I was inviting some Israeli artists. They recommend me to the organizers of the Tel Aviv exposure. When I went there, I met so many of my colleagues, and through that kind of mingling, traveling and networking, the festival also started to grow, because we always recommend each other. We talk, we sit, we describe our stages, our venues, the format of the performances we are interested in. And that's how the festival grew. And of course, the local community accepted it because they also, earn in the week of the festival. They have lots of guests that use the apartments, the restaurants, everything that Šibenik has to offer at the time.
Great. And nowadays that the festival have a history behind, and also you, what do you think that the festival and everything you do in terms of the performing arts give you back? It's kind of what is the comeback to you, to Zorana?
I'm not sure. Can you please explain it better? I'm not sure that I understood.
Yeah, of course. It's about the what do you think after 15 years of the festival and after all this life dedicated to performing arts and to dance, that all this work give you back? What do you think is coming back to you?
Yeah, what I said, something like, what do I get in return?
Yes.
You think?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, immense feeling of fulfillment, that I do something that's healing for the artists, healing for the people, for the audience, healing for everybody who comes to to watch the performances that I select. That I know that the audience, whatever I do for the artists, but of course for the people who love art, for the audience, and not only for the people who love art, who already know about art, but especially I want to, to attract new audience, to show the people that do not buy the ticket for the, contemporary dance performance on the 40s, but I do it in a way that I put in front of them for free some of the performances originally created for the theater, but then I take them out from the theater and I put them on the open air venue, on the stage, when they just passing by, going to some cafe to have a cocktail. They stop and they stay and they don't leave. And that feeling is something when I see that, and they approach me, ask me, are you a festival director? What is this? It's so amazing. I have never seen something like, and that's the food for myself. I know that I'm doing something right. And I know that the person will buy the ticket next year, not for my festival, but in his environment, in his community, he will go and see, well, I saw something in Šibenik, that's amazing.
Great. And finally, talking, I think we spoke a bit last week about it, but what do you think be your biggest mistake or a moment that you think that you fuck up? Because you have a festival that happens on the streets, so mostly, and so it's a place where a lot of different, mobile things happens, so do you remember a moment that you, also can be a funny moment, don't need to be tragic, or
I don't I know there are not many anecdotes. I remember once, now I'm doing, I have to make a kind of an introduction. Now I'm doing kind of open master classes. I'm invited to talk to students of art, whether the cultural entrepreneur, future to be cultural entrepreneurs or young choreographers who want to apply for festivals. So I give them kind of a tools, for that. And then I remember that I told them that they have to come prepared. They have to have, the portfolio, but also the writers, and they have to do the research about where are they coming, what kind of a festival. And there was one professional company, though, Croatian national company, and the dancers came completely without doing any research about where they are coming, and they had some sonography, kind of like some sheets which are supposed just to cover them, cover the parts of the performance. But it was such a windy night, and they couldn't manage those enormous sheets were wildly, blowing all over. So I remember, it was really crazy thing because they couldn't do anything. And I'm not in charge of the technical negotiation. They already did it with the technicians. Technicians explained to them what is the possibility. So that's kind of an anecdote. But what was the next question you asked me? Something else, not only what.
No, like a mistake. This is a kind of the same question. Big mistake or a moment
mistake.
Yeah,
mistake. I have other doubts. I have so many doubts. I have had during this career of a festival director, whether I should, invest more into my own education about the financial knowledge, about writing the applications for some European funds, because I really don't like it. I hate it. I'm such a creative person. I'm an artist too, because I created so much when I was young in really full-length contemporary performances, but for young people, So I was often thinking, am I crazy? Why am I doing such a, it's a job of a manager. Zorana, you are not a manager. You're an artist. But again, this is also a creation. It's also a process of a different kind of creation, though, but it is a creation.
Absolutely. So for the being part of the podcast, we have a tradition since a long time ago that every guest leave a question to the next one. Yeah. So you have, I think, 2 questions. But before I propose to you these questions, what do you like to what question do you want to leave for the next one without knowing who will be? Can be one person, can be 2 persons, because sometimes we have a podcast with more than 1 people. So can be whatever.
You would like me to make a question for another of your guests, if I understood.
Yes, you understood really well. I hope that my spelling be slow and unreachable. So
really, you exactly, but I don't. It would be easier for me if I knew from what area of a culture or a world of art and culture does the person comes. That would be easier. Or you just want me, to drop out any question.
You can drop any question, because the idea is that you don't know who be the next one. So.
Oh, so my question would be. Have you done any research on who the Sebastián is?
Really smart one.
Not only like a director of BIDE, but like who Sebastián really is.
You got me. I think the first time that somebody make this type of let's say approach.
Because you asked me the very similar question.
So you have 2 questions from Carles Salas and Sandra Martin Garcia. They are the heads of the Instituto del Teatro, our University of Dance here. One of them, I think you already answered, and I pronounce it in Spanish because they left the question in Spanish, and then I translate to English. So the first one is, ¿Qué error has tenido y cómo lo solucionaste? Otra vez. ¿Qué error has tenido y cómo lo solucionaste? Y la segunda es, ¿cuál ha sido tu último gran aprendizaje? So, in English, what mistake have you made and how you sort it out? I think you kind of shared this before when I talk about the fuck ups and the mistakes. And the second one is, what was the most important thing you learned recently? And I think you can address.
Well, I would thank you, but I would like to answer again both questions together, because they are connected, and it will last perhaps 2 minutes more than you expect.
No problem. We are not in a hurry.
I had a problem suddenly. I didn't have that 5 years ago, but when I had, before the war started in Israel, we had a kibbutz company at the big stage of St. Michael's Fortress, and it was a really a long time negotiation period. I didn't have a lot of funds. I had to ask for many sponsors, etc. To make this story short, I managed to bring them to the fortress. It was the 15 minutes before the start of the show. They asked that they do not want any speaking, some formal things like protocol, the mayor, the Ministry of Culture, something. They didn't want that because the performance needed some kind of a dramatic intro. So we promised them nothing will be. So I didn't prepare for any kind of a statement for the media. I hated it anyway. I'm not such a person that likes to talk in front of the cameras, but everybody knows that in my town. But, for that evening, I was so happy that I don't have to talk in front of the cameras because the kibbutz management said no. But in some way, my PR told me Ministry of the Culture and Media of Republic of Croatia is here. She wants to say a few words. It's a really big occasion. And I said, okay, let's do that. Then we gather some 5 or 6 cameras, many important people, and the ambassadors, mayor, the ministry, etc. And then when I started my speech, I blocked. It went blank. I said 2 sentences, and I couldn't move, and everybody was watching at me, and it was so embarrassing. I was so upset, and I will never ever forget. And what did I learn out from it? Because everybody was in the end came to me and hugged me and knew that it was too much. I just had the burnt out symptom. I was completely burnt out. But what I learned from that, I started taking classes, the sessions of coaching, business coaching sessions, because I knew that I was one to blame. I had to be prepared. 1 sentence, 1, 2, or 2. I'm a festival director, so there is no excuse for such things.
Great. So thank you so much. And finally, what title do you like to put to this conversation? What would be the tagline of this podcast?
I don't. Please help me here. The line of this, we talk about so many things. What stays behind a festival director? Something like that. So what is behind a festival director? Because when I start my masterclass with young students, the first question I ask them is, how do you imagine? How do you envision one festival director, and then they start, like a strict person who knows what to tell, what to do in each situation. Then I tell them, you are completely wrong. You are completely wrong.
Yeah, you're right. So how would you want to make the question? So, or maybe the tagline, sorry. So how is how to behave as a, I don't know. Do it again. So for me, will be the tagline. I like the line of thoughts. So
you want the title again? The title? Who stands behind, or what? Who is actually a festival director? Something like that.
I think it's fantastic. So, Zorana, thank you so much to give us some piece of your time. I know that you are close to take your holidays, and I hope that you take a really deep rest that you deserve in Malta, no?
Yeah, right.
And
I will be doing business as well. Don't
I know, I
worry.
know, I know. But I hope that at least a few days you do nothing, go to the beach, put solar protector, and enjoy yourself. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your energy, and thank you so much to, give space to all length of artists in your festival that are, enjoying being there and also performing with the audience in real time on the streets. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sebastian. I just want to say that my energy always responds to some other people's energy, and my energy responded to your. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You are welcome. This was the episode number 146, and see you in the next one.